Hi, my name's Bandit. You might be wondering where the I've been. Allow me to explain. When Tears of the Kingdom released, I'm sure that all, or at least most of you watching right now, joined me in no-lifing this game for the following several weeks. I even streamed it a few times, so, huge thanks to those of you who watched me play the game over on Twitch. The more I played the game, though, the more I was made aware of just how many questions about the story and lore of the franchise were answered, but also raised or left untouched altogether. And in this video, I'd like to focus our attention on the several topics that are still left completely unanswered and up to speculation even months after the game's release. Oh, and spoiler alert, obviously. The first question that everyone had going into the game that still persists after the ending is, who and what are the Zonai really? Now, Tears of the Kingdom did answer a lot of questions regarding the Zonai. In the first place, it confirmed their existence when it was all just speculative theories before, and it showed us that they were an ancient, highly advanced people group that descended upon Hyrule from the skies above. And their technologies and artifacts, such as the secret stones, were so advanced that the early Hylians regarded them as gods. Interestingly enough though, the Zonai we meet in Tears of the Kingdom are nothing like the more barbaric Zonai that we thought we would meet based on speculations from Breath of the Wild, but that's neither here nor there. By the time of the game's back-in-time timeframe, which I will just refer to as the Birth of Hyrule timeframe, since apparently Zelda gets sent back to the beginning of the Kingdom of Hyrule, there are only two Zonai left in the world according to Ganondorf, which would be King Rauru and his sister Minoru. And that is about all we know about the Zonai. We still don't know where they actually come from, or why they all left the world in the first place, or where they went, or if they still exist today, or how they were able to create these powerful artifacts called the secret stones that enhance a user's power levels far beyond what they normally are capable of, or why they even created these stones in the first place, especially since they made them long before Ganondorf revealed his true evil intentions. Why did they take an interest in Hylians at all? Just to leave them with technology and all-powerful secret stones that led to the world being threatened by evil? It almost sounds like a retelling of the creation story, which is to say the three golden goddesses that created the world and left the omnipotent Triforce behind directly led to all of the good versus evil conflicts to come. And furthermore, if Rauru and Minoru are around at the birth of Hyrule, and their Zonai people have already come and gone from the world, then where were they in Skyward Sword, which takes place before the surface of the world is inhabited? Or did they all arrive after Skyward Sword and then leave before the birth of Hyrule? Or was the birth of Hyrule before Skyward Sword, and the kingdom dissolved by the events of Skyward Sword only to be founded again after Skyward Sword? There's just so much we don't know yet, but moving on. The second question that remains unanswered is, what is Ganondorf? How is Ganondorf? Why is Ganondorf? Jokes aside though, why do he do what he do in Tears of the Kingdom? Why does he threaten the kingdom of Hyrule? There's no Triforce to fight over, and he didn't even know about the existence of the omnipotent secret stones until he was already actively attacking the kingdom. Not to mention, he had no idea who or what Hylia and Zelda are. So what gives? Without any other insight into his motivations behind betraying King Rauru and trying to take over Hyrule, it's left to just be a simple command and conquer explanation for his actions, which, if I'm honest, feels very hollow, especially since Ganondorf in the past has had such a rich and almost relatable backstory and motivation to his actions, one that in a certain light might almost be considered noble, with this being the first canonical appearance of Ganondorf Dragmire in the series in over 17 years, it leaves a lot to be answered. Here's hoping that we get more Ganondorf and early Gerudo lore in the inevitable DLC. Speaking of Ganondorf's motivations, by the way, at number 3, we've got to ask yet again, where is the Triforce? Seriously though, where is it? At least in Breath of the Wild, we had that flash of the Triforce symbol when Zelda used her powers, which left some people, not me, but some people satisfied with the speculation that the full Triforce now resides inside of Princess Zelda somehow. In Tears of the Kingdom though, we literally do not have a single mention or even flash of a symbol of the Triforce anywhere. I mean, unless you consider Rauru's weird triangle hand pose that he strikes whenever he uses his powers to be a Triforce reference, but even then, that is super vague. I personally found it rather strange that the Triforce would not be mentioned even back in the Birth of Hyrule timeframe, which is when the Triforce was definitely a thing. The Triforce has been the catalyst for the conflicts and stories of most, if not all, of the mainline Zelda games. So to have its last appearance be 10 years ago in A Link Between Worlds is strange, especially when characters like Ganondorf that normally fight over the Triforce are brought back but without this key piece of their normal story arcs, but I digress. Moving on, at number 4, I pose the question of who or what are the other dragons? Assuming you've beaten the game or that you haven't yet but you're okay with spoilers since you're still watching at this point, we find out that in order to transform into a dragon, the likes of which look exactly like Dinral, Farosh, and Naydra, you have to consume a Zonai secret stone, and the process is irreversible. Well, unless you have the power of plot armor on your side, but that's neither here nor there. Since we never got anything on the 3 golden dragons' origins in Breath of the Wild, it could then theoretically be that they used to be individuals who ingested secret stones, just like Zelda and Ganondorf did. The question is then, who was it that ingested the stones? Were they ancient Zonai? Ancient Hylians? The golden goddesses themselves? There's no way of telling whether this was even the case, so it remains unanswered. Number 5. Who was the ancient hero of the 10,000-year-old calamity? Now, we finally got some insight into this ancient red-haired hero who wielded the Master Sword ages ago. But again, in classic Tears of the Kingdom fashion, it really just ended up bringing up even more questions. Once you finish all 152 shrines in Tears of the Kingdom, which is up from the 120 in Breath of the Wild, you are gifted with the ancient hero's aspect, which literally transforms Link into the ancient hero of the calamity. And as you can see, it's a Zonai, complete with the snout, Zonai armor and markings, and Link's iconic blue eyes. The thing is though, we've always known that the spirit of the hero reincarnates as a different Link from era to vanquish evil alongside Hylia's descendant known as Zelda. At no point has Link ever not been a Hylian. But then there's this. Randomly, in the middle of Hyrulean history, the spirit of the hero was a Zonai. And let me be clear, just because the calamity of 10,000 years ago was 10,000 years ago does not mean that it was the origin of time or anything even close to that. As a reminder, it is canon according to both in-game information and extracurricular information from Masterworks Creating a Champion that the events of the distant past, which is the history predating the 10,000-year-old calamity, tells us the story of other Zelda games like Ocarina of Time, directly referencing the adventure of the hero of time and Zora Princess Ruto. And remember that according to Ganondorf, all of the Zonai had left the world by the time of Hyrule's birth and King Raru's reign. So why and how is one hero, somewhere, smack dab in the middle of the timeline, randomly a Zonai? Sounds to me like we need a game detailing the events of the 10,000-year-old calamity more than anything else. Next, at number 6, we have to ask, is Malice Gloom? And if so, why are they different? And if not, how did that switch happen? According to the Teardrop Memories, Ganondorf was sealed away by the power of Raru's swirly green light at the beginning of the Kingdom of Hyrule. It is then implied that the powerful dark substance known as Gloom leaked out of Ganondorf in the years and ages to come and gave rise to the Calamity Ganons we know of from Breath of the Wild. Or did it? See, Calamity Ganon, which was said to have originated from underneath Hyrule Castle, hint hint, was created from a similar substance known as Malice, which also is the substance responsible for capturing all of the Sheikah war machines in Breath of the Wild. The Blood Moon in Breath of the Wild is also a phenomenon said to paint the sky red with Ganon's malice. But in Tears of the Kingdom, malice is nowhere to be found, and the Blood Moon still happens, but now it's Gloom that paints the sky red, and Gloom that has created all of Ganondorf's monsters, even the ones showed to us from way back when in the beginning of the Kingdom of Hyrule. So, originally, Ganondorf the Demon King used Gloom, but then Ganondorf the Demon King used Malice, which is very similar, but then Ganondorf the Demon King went back to using Gloom again after a little while. It's kind of confusing. Number 7, speaking of Gloom though, one of the first things we see in the game that's also one of the most shocking images to ever come from The Legend of Zelda as a franchise would be the shattering of the Master Sword. Now, I'm gonna go on a mini rant, and I apologize in advance for doing so, but for those who have been fans of the franchise since before Breath of the Wild, you'll know that the Master Sword is more than just a really powerful sword. It's more than an extremely powerful sword. It is the blade of Evil's Bane, and according to Raru, not this Raru, but the original Raru from Ocarina of Time, it is a blade which Evil cannot even touch. We even see it happening in Twilight Princess. It is ultimate in its power and can even kill a Triforce-empowered individual such as Ganondorf, not this Ganondorf, but the Ganondorf from Twilight Princess, who previously had cheated death via the power of the Triforce of Power, implying that the Master Sword's sacred ability trumps even that of the Triforce. So when we saw that the sword was to be broken in Tears of the Kingdom, our thoughts and theories ran ran wild. What could possibly exist in the world that could even remotely harm the blade of evil's bane? Turns out it was just gloom, which is a substance that's largely unexplained, which, when you reclaim the restored Master Sword later in the game, is no longer able to shatter the blade. Now, I'm not upset by this, just a little disappointed that the sword wasn't broken for, I guess, a bit more grandeur of a reason, but that's just me ranting. Rant over. The actual unanswered question here is, why wasn't the blade able to just have its gloom recalled out of it? If you've been on my channel for a while, I predicted that recall would be used to somehow restore the Master Sword to its former glory. However, I did not know that when used here, recall would really just rewind the world around the blade back in time to the birth of Hyrule instead of recalling the blade itself, which, if it had done for, a period of 24 hours or so, would have actually repaired the blade and removed the effects of gloom from it. A good question, I say. Moving on, question number 8 is, why did Rauru begin building Shrines of Light before Ganondorf's attack? We can see in the Mulgera raid cutscene that there are already Shrines of Light present across Hyrule, and these shrines are meant to provide a chosen hero with lights of blessing that, according to Rauru, are meant to purge evil. But prior to Ganondorf revolting against Hyrule here, there was no threat to the land. Did Zelda advise the king to begin building these shrines? Was there some sort of prophecy that foretold an eventual evil? Was Rauru bored? We may never know, but we can always assume. At number 9, I have the smaller question of whether or not the old DLC or amiibo items from Breath of the Wild, such as the Majora's Mask or the Hero of Time Tunic or the Fierce Deity Sword, are now considered canon within the world of Tears of the Kingdom, which would mean that they are also canon in the world of Breath of the Wild. Each of these items are from earlier games that have taken place tens of thousands of years ago, and again were only introduced to the world of Breath of the Wild's Hyrule by way of DLC or real-life amiibo taps. In Tears of the Kingdom, though, we have every one of these fourth wall breaking items present in actual locations, scattered throughout the depths in various caves across Hyrule's surface in-game, some of which have been placed there by Misko, the Great Bandit. So this begs the question, are these items canon? And does this mean that the amiibo taps are all canon, which means that Epona, the Horse of Legend, is canon? Or Wolfling from Twilight Princess is canon? And if so, how in the goddess's green earth are each of these priceless world-altering relics located where they are in the present day? And if they're not canon, does that mean that Misko the Great Bandit is non-canon? Where does that end? Something tells me that if your name isn't Eiji Aonuma, you may never know the answer. Now, before we reach the final unanswered question from the game, I did have a few honorable mention questions that aren't big enough to warrant their own place on the list, such as, is Ganondorf's gloomy, leaky corpse that's been down there since the birth of Hyrule apparently the reason behind all the evil in the franchise, aka, is Ganondorf's corpse the literal curse of demise? And if so, does his actual death at the end of the game mean that the curse is broken and that there is no more evil to come in the future, ending the timeline? What about, why did Rauru's hand randomly fall off of Ganondorf at the exact moment that Link and Zelda approached it? And if it had run out of power, then why was its stone still fully powered when Zelda picked it up? Oh, and finally, if Sonia and Rauru are Zelda's ancestors, where is their child? Since Ganondorf kills Sonia on screen, that must mean that their child is alive and well somewhere in order for Sonia's bloodline to continue on and reach Zelda eventually. But why is there no mention of a child anywhere in the game? Even Zelda's mother, which has never been present in either game, was mentioned several times in Breath of the Wild. But anyway, back to the list. Finally, at number 10, we have perhaps the biggest question in all of Tears of the Kingdom, and that is, if Zelda and Minoru and the rest of the early sages raised the Great Sky Island into the sky in order for the hero to eventually revive there far above Ganondorf's reach, does that mean that they raised all of the other Sky Islands as well? I mean, that would make sense since they all appear suddenly at the exact moment Zelda travels back in time and are not present in the Birth of Hyrule cutscenes. But the first question obviously is, why did they raise all the other Sky Islands if Link was only meant to resurrect on the Great Sky Island? And the second question is, if these Sky Islands were raised out of the work of Zelda/Minoru and the sages, which, as a reminder, is when only 2 Zonai were left in the world, how then did the Zonai youth use the diving islands for testing bravery, according to a steward construct? Isn't that contradictory to the fact that the Zonai were not present in the world at the point of these islands being raised into the sky? Meaning there could not have been any Zonai youth using them to test their own skills? Regardless of how many questions are or are not left unanswered after playing this game, that has absolutely nothing to do with how amazing it felt to play Tears of the Kingdom. I just wanted to specify that since I do really like the game, in case some of you were doubting that since I made this video. With that out of the way though, what do you think? Are there even more questions that I didn't think of, or have some of these actually been answered and I just missed the explanations? Let me know in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching and listening to my scratchy voice. Please leave a like if you're excited for videos to return to the channel, and subscribe if you haven't already for much more gaming lore to come. Huge thanks as always to my bandit crew who make my day every day and are the reason I returned to making videos. If you're interested in helping this channel stay alive and grow, feel free to check out the many opportunities in the description below. Well, that's all I wrote in this script, so I guess this is it. Follow me on my socials, and I'll see you next time. This is Bandit, signing out. Peace!